we'll discuss the lubrication system inside this manual transaxle. So most of our manual transmissions and transaxles are what we call splash lubed. And by splash lubed, I mean that the lubrication is going to be facilitated by the movement of the ring gear. So the transmission would roughly set in this orientation, and the fill plug would make it so that the transmission fluid level is roughly right about here, just above center line of the ring gear. So with the gear oil inside here, as the transmission moves down the road, the ring gear is spinning. And as the ring gear spins, the teeth of the ring gear act like little scoops and pick that fluid up, and it throws that fluid up into the various components of the transmission. Now, this transmission had what's called a trough. And that trough sits in the transmission case right there. So as it drives down the road and the ring gear throws that oil up, that oil is thrown up, hits what would be the top of the transmission case, and deflects down into this trough. Since the transmission in the vehicle would be setting like this, gravity pulls that oil that has landed in the trough and brings it down to the back half of the transmission. The back half of the transmission's cover has a little pipe that stands right there, and the trough, its orientation, would be right here. So the fluid that is being thrown by the ring gear goes into the trough, goes down the trough into the little pocket there, and it feeds that little tube that's affixed to the back half of the transmission case. That little tube, in turn, fits into the end of the input shaft. The input shaft, much like the output shaft, is hollow. So I like to think of it kind of like the musical instrument a flute, where it has a hollow tube and little holes coming out to the side. The speed gears are supported by these roller bearings. And so I need to get lubrication into these roller bearings. Yet the roller bearings ride on these sleeves. Well, I want you to notice that this sleeve has a hole in it, and the shaft has a groove right where this lubrication hole is. So as fluid comes into the back of the shaft, it fills up the inside of that shaft. Centrifugal force from the shaft spinning is going to take the oil that's inside that shaft and push it outwards. As the oil is pushed outwards from the shaft, it goes through the hole that's in the bearing race or sleeve. That in turn feeds oil onto the needle bearings, which in turn is going to lubricate the speed gear. So the lubrication system for the input shaft is made possible via the ring gear throwing oil into the trough feeding that tube, which then feeds the input shaft, and centrifugal force pulls that oil out. The output shaft, much like the input shaft, is cross-drilled, so a hole goes all the way through, and the cross-drilling is going to be where the speed gears are at. So much like the input shaft, on the transmission case, we can see that there's a little tube that sticks out. As the ring gear spins, oil is thrown off of the ring gear and comes up into this little cross-drilled hole right here. That hole goes down, feeds that tube, which then allows lubricating oil to go into the output shaft. And again, centrifugal force pulls that fluid that's in the center of the output shaft out to lubricate the bearings that are on the speed gears.